that drum is going to vibrate at the frequency of the sound. And there's studies, I guess I probably should write it down, books that show that experiments that have been done where they've placed like metal filings on a surface and played different sounds, and those sounds created patterns, those metal filings. Different sounds actually equate in different shapes that have different effects. So sounds are things, and they can affect you in specific types of ways. Certain sounds can heal you, certain sounds can make you become diseased. Because the different levels of physical, the etheric, the emotional, the mental, the higher mental, the intuitional, each of those levels of consciousness also relates to frequencies or energies. So you can play different types of sound that then will activate or stimulate those levels of consciousness or experience. Or you can play music that acts as a disruptive factor.
So like if I heard, like you hear the specific song, and it's like maybe the song was written in 1963, it's not so much the words of the song, too much to the words, but it doesn't, okay, it'll bring back memory like, oh, I was really here, blah, 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 but at the same time, the feeling comes back too. That same exact feeling that you felt maybe in 1955, you have the same feeling by the song.
That's a condition. That's basically the song activates a memory.
Yeah, I'm saying it's memory, but the feeling, which is...
But the memory, see, the memory then stimulates see, your body responds to the thinking of your mind. Like, I used to stress management training, right? And the issue with stress management is not the stress, it's how you respond to the stress, which would create a negative impact on the body. So the example was you go into a movie theater, which is a cellular image on the screen, and it can be a deep love movie, and certain people will respond by crying, and they'll be all in the film. You have a horror movie, and people will be in fear. And if your mind goes into a fearful state, your body will react like you actually are experiencing real fear. Which means your muscles will tense up, your heart rate will go up, your respiration will change. And physically, you're in no danger. With your mind and perceiving it, your body will react to it like it's really happening. So in terms of the music actually just reminds you of the experiences that were connected to that music. And then your body can start to relive. Right, so you start feeling it.
You said 7 what?
7 liberal science.
And they were
astronomy, geometry, arithmetic, music, rhetoric, grammar, and logic. Page 28, Stolen Legacy. But anyway, let's move forward. We want to get, again, we can, as I said before, to really deal with this the way it should be dealt with, we then would have to come back and actually have a separate class on each one of those. The minimum teaching session, each one of those. So you really get into each one of those. There's a whole body of literature that is related to each one of these subjects that is concerned. You can hopefully remind and bring in a book list that's related to these subjects. Or you can go to the bookstore and just go to those subjects and let your intuitive mind pick out the ones you're really interested in. The next piece here is Indictment and Persecution of Greek Philosophers. Page 29. So basically, I think we had talked about this, how the Greek philosophers had been persecuted by the Greeks for bringing in foreign ideas and corrupting the Athenian youth. They actually had been persecuted for bringing in these foreign ideas. So basically what James is saying is if this philosophy was developed in Greece, then how could people be persecuted for bringing in foreign ideas? They had to come from outside that country, so they couldn't get Greek ideas or indigenous ideas. So that was the point there. The next section, we're going to come back and deal with the virtues. The next piece he talks about is that there was a grand lodge in Egypt which had associated schools and lodges in the ancient world. We kind of talked about this in some of the other sessions we had. We usually go over for those who weren't in those sessions. Yes.
How did you say, and I read that about 10 years ago, I don't remember a lot that I read. He was saying, how about the JD in Australia?
So philosophy, and then the other piece is the issue that we talked about, what is civilization? We equate civilization with physical structure. When actually civilization or civilized people live at a certain level of consciousness. Because I don't have big buildings and physical technology does not mean I'm not civilized. Because I may be living in a high spiritual relationship with my fellow human beings and my environment.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like when Egyptians traveled into Central America, the Egyptians all end up building the same building, the same pyramid.
Right.
If they were in Australia, they have the same buildings, the Egyptians were there. They have a school there. They had to have a school in a building. They would have built the same building. They wouldn't.
Maybe and maybe not. So if you trace the E5 people down to Nigeria, if you trace or relate to the Dogon in West Africa, but if you study their philosophy and the ideas that they're related to, you see the same ideas. Even the level of knowledge.
Said one book of the beginning and the second book. Who's that second book by?
All three of those are like very massive. So anyway, he says there were mystery schools, or what we would commonly call lodges in Greece and other lands outside of Egypt, whose work was carried on according to the Osiris, the Grand Lodge of Egypt. Such schools have frequently been referred to as private or philosophic mysteries, and their founders were initiates of the Egyptian mystery. The Ionian temple at the Lodge of Euclid at Megara, the Lodge of Pythagoras at Konya, and the Orphic Temple at Delphi, with the schools of Plato and Aristotle. All of these were various lodges, and also, so you had lodges and you also had private or philosophic schools. So all of them were actually lodges, and some of the students went out and started their own academies or institutes or schools, and became private philosophical mysteries. I was reading some stuff about Paul, and what he was saying about Pythagoras and the Greek philosophers is that what they did is that they took the Kemetic and African mystery system and they translated it into a form that would be relative to the mind of the Europeans. And so their greatness came relative to the Western world, able to translate the mysteries in such a form where the West could engage in dealing with the knowledge. And so again, a lot of times we interpret the Westerners stating the greatness of someone really from their reference point, as opposed to where if we change reference points, then we change the truth of the statement. So sometimes we engage in arguments, and what we have to do is we have to establish a common reference point upon which we're basing this debate or conversation. A lot of times we engage in a conversation or a discussion, and we take for granted that we're coming from the same reference point. A lot of arguments, personal relationships on the job, is based upon people having established a standard in which they are judging the discussion. Probably the majority of your situations are from that basic foundation. That's why it's very important to establish what is the reference point upon which we're coming from as we get into this discussion.
If you go through life, is it true when they say the Moors
Handed down from generation to generation, from student and teacher to student, continually. The ideas, the concepts that are handed down.
But how did they get out of the right?
Because you had people that were students. You had people who were students. It says there was a grand lodge in Egypt which had associated schools and lodges in the ancient world. You had students that came to and got the knowledge and went back to their own particular continent and taught the knowledge relative to the customs of the particular people they came from.
So they just
So the I Ching, talk about Zoroastrianism and Mithraism and I Ching and all this come out of the same body of knowledge. It just was formatted into a language that was related to the particular people that they were talking to. Formulated new doctrines of their own. So their philosophy had been handed down by the great Egyptian hierophants through the mystics. My teacher instructor was fresh from Korea. I couldn't even speak English. So I had to learn by looking and by example. And then after periods of time being in that environment, you start picking up language and words and these types of things. So here he comes from Korea, out of a monastery, to the Huntington Park, opens up a school, right, which is really a philosophical school, and start teaching the skills, meditation, dietary discipline. You know, we have a virtue system, we have a physical development system, we have philosophical concept, you learn healing, herbs, these types of things. So although we couldn't speak the same language, through example and experience, initially, I learned, and then over time, you learn to communicate. And so they had people who, for example, who left Korea and went to all the continents, Africa, South America, and was teaching and dividing. We have a conference or a tournament, and you have students from all over the world come together, and although we don't speak the same language, we can communicate with each other and operate and exchange information and knowledge with each other. We speak in different languages. It's the same thing. And story form, images.
They have black music. When like when the kids, when Al-Say went to Africa and he's listening to the guy talk, the
oral his story.
Yeah, the story.
Right.
So is that way back that
They've been here since human beings.
And to piggyback what Nefertari said, and excuse me for using all these European terms, but the writings were there. For example, the Sumerian papyrus, the Morris papyrus, and then when you look at the Rosetta Stone that was found, Rosetta Stone was written in Greek, some mediated language, and then the meta-netter. So being able to convert the language over into the meta-netter to what we know English today, we were able to now read the meta-netter for ourselves. So now with all our new understanding of how to read the meta-netter ourselves, that could be a place where
It's the soul that knows. By stealing the outer senses and starting to commune with your own soul or spiritual self, the truth will be revealed to you. Description of the Egyptian temple, page 32. number of things. We can see the structure being of a rectangular structure. Now, I need to bring, hopefully next week I'll try to bring, do you have an overhead projector? I'll try to show you these images of where these patterns of the rectangle actually, the pattern of the rectangle actually comes from the structure of the sun's path at the equinox, or the solstice, the winter solstice and the summer solstice. If you do a geometrical pattern relative to the pole star, you will get a triangle. Within that triangle, you will have rectangles that make up the patterns which they took from heaven and duplicated on the earth. And of course, the rectangular structure is the fundamental structure of all the temples and also the universities. The universities are built upon a rectangular courtyard around which the major campus is constructed. And then the original temples were also the original university, culture centers, places of healing and initiation. But the temple is also the human temple, because you have the different levels. You have the outer court where the masses are, which is the body, the doorway, everybody's in the physical. Then you have the inner court where they have the sacrifices, which is the heart. Because to live a life of virtue, you have to sacrifice the world, the physical demands of the world. Then you had the inner court, which is the head, where the priest went, and then inside the head, you have the Holy of Holies, which is related to the inner chamber where the pineal gland of the third eye is located. The one reaches a state of illumination, which is the third degree, right? You become united or vibrate at the same frequency as higher consciousness. And so you can see the actual pattern that they had in the temple. The true temple is us. This is the true temple, which is a reflection of the universe, and we're a little universe. So in the God, when they say God, man is made in the image of God, we're not talking about a physical form. That's why man tried to now project his physical image onto God, misinterpreting what it was said. It's not the physical, it's the unseen, not the seen, that's the real. So they're talking about the laws of the universe, how we operate in the same relationship that the universe operates. Same relationship in the hierarchy of forces, that how the universe operates is the same thing as reflected in us. So it's in that image that we're made of God, not this physical form. How can God be in a physical form anyway? Because God is all. Again, we go back to logic. Reasonableness. So the next piece, so he was talking about how this trip to the Egyptian temple became the foundation for all temples all over the planet. So if you go and look at all these sacred sites, you go in and look at the structure of these temples will be structured around the same pattern. So he's saying then that where did this pattern come from? This pattern was one of the Grand Lodge. There were sub-lodges on the major continents where all the teachings were taught. If you go to those other sacred sites, you will see structures that are built around the same pattern. So this is another piece of the puzzle showing how this pattern was transmitted to these places out of kindergarten. There's a whole study on the science of monuments, which is a whole course within itself, to get into the deeper aspects of temple building. There's a book, The Temple in Man, by Dembrebrah, which really gets into showing how the structure of the temple itself took the sacred science and articulated and expressed the sacred science in the actual structure of the temple itself. The dimensions between one room and another, and we have, the whole thing. He has a number of books that talk about it. The second piece is the location of the Masonic Grand Lodge of Antiquity. When new people come into it, they can start changing it. And then later on, it gets watered down. So if you're not conservative to hold and make sure that put people students who come in have to learn the exact same thing. That's the only way you're going to preserve something over a long period of time. So you have to have a certain element of conservatism. So he said because of that, and also because of the grandeur and the dynamics of the Kemetic religion, it was very successful. One, because it was conservative, and the students had to go through very strict discipline to get the knowledge. One thing. Second, the grandeur of the architecture and of the processions and the various rituals and ceremonies created an enormous awe and admiration and inspiration to people who came in contact with that. As witness now to people who just go to Kemet and through the ruins become inspired. So just think what kind of inspiration you would receive if the ruins were in full perfect order, and there were processions with thousands of people color coordinated with sound and music, all synchronized, would create such a state of mind that would be totally overwhelming.
Wasn't it that
for us to spend the actual amount of time to go to the depth of those ideas, we would be here for years. So then, but it's a spiral. So if you stay on the path, you will always revisit these ideas again, but when you come back to them, you'll get another level. Because you're going to bring some more information with you each time. And it's a spiral. You keep coming back and revisiting these ideas over and over again to reveal a different level. So I'm actually trying to move here.
Teach.
So anyway, so it talks about, we're talking about the whole Egypt. So it says, the staunch faith of the Egyptians, together with their mysterious forms of worship, is the stronghold of Africa. During this, it says, out of the priests migrated out of the Nile and went into the west, east, and southern parts of Africa, and also in the other parts of the world. So that's why in Diop talks about the warlocks, and how their language is remnants of the Kemetic language. They have to go into decline the Yoruba. And the Yoruba religion is also remnants of those migrations out of the Nile during the period of the fall. And so, and then also as they saw this fall coming, because they also saw that everything has a birth, a rise, and a death. So there was a period of decline. And so they encouched those concepts and ideas into various formats, various stories, fables, and images, which were then carried around the world in popular format, which you can now see in tarot cards, and astrology, you can see it in Masons, and even in the various religious doctrines. People lost the inner interpretation of what those things really meant, and they started to interpret those things in literal words. So now we're into a time where it's a time to reopen the study of the mysteries so that people can, again, release the true knowledge. Southern Africa, even over in the parts of India and Asia, the knowledge was still developing and growing. But because during the period of the AD period, the greater part of the Mediterranean world was being ruled by the Europeans. From their perspective, the light was dead. And basically because they were unable to build or create on it. They were just trying to hold on which had been transferred to them and not develop anything of their own. And in actuality, when the teachers was pulled away, they actually went into a decline. And then what happened is over time, every time the decline, you had an infusion of black creativity would come back in and re-stimulate the development of the European world. And the reason why you have the great United States here is basically because of the ability of the African Americans to be here, provide that creative seed that then is controlled by the Europeans and capitalized on by the Europeans. Primary example is George Washington. All those 200-some products from the peanut, we don't control one of those products. That makes about hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
That's right.
Billions of dollars a year.
That's right.
And none of that is controlled by the people out of which that creativity came. And that's can be multiplied probably ad infinitum in terms of every field of endeavor that's here today, still going on right here today. And corporations right now, black geniuses is creating all kinds of new ideas, concepts, and inventions because of the corporations. You just hear about it from the corporate structure and you don't see the face of it.
Right.
And so because the corporations are ruled by Europeans, and again, the European gets the credit and not the creativity that's coming from black mind. And it perpetuates a sense of inferiority in the black population. Question back to you.
Not on, it's like on the subject on the Jewish.
The royalty or the power follows the woman. Okay? Because out of Africa it was matriarchal. The female was the core for the bloodline, which is true because the bloodline does pass on to the female. And mother is the source of the family. And so it's a whole historical thing we get into talking about the whole matriarchal concept. So that as it moved to royalty in royal times, to become the king, you came from the mother's side of the family. So if I'm king and I have a son, my son is not the heir, but the nephew of the queen. So it has come from the queen's side of the family. So as we moved on, and see a lot of these practices became in the decline. A lot of things we're talking about was actually in the decline of the civilization.
That's when the whites came in?
Yeah, because you're talking about right here.
No, I was married to a queen, and I had like 5.
Male married his sister because the sister had to transfer the power to the male. So to maintain the power in the family, they then, and some of the stuff was ceremonial, just to technically transfer it. All of it was not actually physical. I mean, now I had to go through, some may have been saying that it was a technical thing to maintain the power, transfer the power from the female, so the male could legitimately rule and sit on the throne.
Now I got one more question.
Because in a sense, the woman was the foundation of the throne, on which the male had to come from to have authority.
So if they had children, with the children, is it true that too much blood is mixed that the children would come out of form? That's not true at all?
I don't know. Yes and no. Some people say I don't know. Some people say that.
This is
It's probably yes and no. Sometimes it probably can happen, sometimes it doesn't. It's not like it's genetics. It can happen, it may not happen.
Well, this is a little bit like the families, the Europeans, the dynasties there. That's different than what he's talking about here. In the European dynasties, they did run the family, and then they ran through the family, they ran out of the family with disease and all the other things. That's documented. But that's not the same as this. It did happen to them. In fact, some of the bloodlines in Europe, they wiped them out by interbreeding.
But Dadisi, looking at Europe, didn't they have like all these different houses from all over these different countries that kept the royal blood somewhat intact? Because I can't say if it was intact or not, but they kept them separated because of all the different European countries. Couldn't it have been the same in Kemet, where Nubia happened to have a royal line, and Waset, they a little bit farther down, they had a royal line. Maybe it's Abyssinia or Saudi Arabia, where you want to call these places, all of them had royal lines, and they could have been family in that way, interrelated that way.
Yeah, I think it's not monolithic, it's not linear, it's not just one thing. It's a variety. It's just like life. It's different situations, different cases. It's not just black and white, 1 and 2, different varieties. And a lot of them also had multiple wives. So the actual wife that the kid came from would not have been the sister. Like I said, a lot of it was ceremonial to transfer the authority to the male, but then they had multiple wives. They would marry wives from different sections of the country or the different countries to unite to one empire because it became one family. And And so the kids can, you know, say, me and your brother and sister, we may be ceremonially married, but then this wife is the firstborn son. So that becomes the heir, as opposed to, you know, say,
But we might not never have no physical contact.
you may not have that. Right.
One last thing, Ramses II had 150 children.
That's true?
But had multiple wives, families. It was mostly ritual ceremonies and everything, not the relationship. They were already brothers.
I think part of the problem happened when the Europeans took it again being literal.
Yeah.
They started doing it literal.
That's right. That's why this ceremony, they keep the running.
It's from Ancient Mysteries and Modern Masonry, The Meaning of True Initiation by C.H. Vail. It says, in speaking of the Egyptian mysteries, it says, in Egyptian cosmogony, water was the mother of the world, the matrix of all created beings. Man was considered as an image of the world. The initiate was to be born again to a new life, and the baptism henceforth symbolized the primeval waters. It was on this account that the initiate was called Moses, a word signifying in Egyptian, according to Josephus, saved from the water or by the water. Water was a symbol of purity and designated the birth of the pure or initiated. Again, he says, speaking of the method of Egyptian baptism, Horus, or Heru, and Jehudi pour water on the head of the candidate, who is transformed to divine life and to purity. The legend accompanying this scene translates thus. Horus, son of Isis, baptized with water and fire. This is repeated 3 times. The name given to the baptized or anointed, as we have seen, was Moses, signifying regenerated or begotten again. Remember, the lawgiver of the Jews was called by the Egyptians Moses, one saved by water, or in other words, one initiated. In the Acts of the Apostles, we are told that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. If so, he must have been an initiate. The great mystery of Egypt was the second birth, the birth of Horus. Throughout the sacred writings of Egypt, there is no doctrine of which more frequent mention is made than that of a divine birth. The divine birth is the birth of a divine child, or the divine child is the child of divinity in you, which is the birth of the soul, the spiritual self, which comes out through purification. So by purifying yourself, by living a life of virtue and studying the disciplines of the liberal arts and sciences, the virtues purify your emotional body, and the liberal arts and sciences condition your intellectual body, which is the soul part, right? Emotions and intellect. So then by practicing those, what you then do is purify yourself, which then takes you to the next level of spirit. And on that note, we can pass these out.
All right, yeah.
Finally, I had just Xeroxed one page, right? It had the virtues that we're going to go over. On the second page, it had this piece here, and on my notes I saw it says Moses. I said, oh, okay, let me give a little tidbit out, right? So we come to the session, and of course, Brother Man say, Moses. So what I'm trying to say is, your intuitive mind knows, the soul knows. And it's always trying to tell you and let you know what you really should do. But because we're not trained to follow those intuitional promptings, we disobey the higher call. We wind up someplace we don't supposed to be. Right. That's why they say you have to be, the feminine side is the receptive side. And you have to be receptive. To get the knowledge.
Yes, sir. That's taking it back 10,000 BC. Plus.
That's right. There you go.
Do there exist any descriptions of the God Kings?
So what?
Do there exist any descriptions of the God Kings?
Not in here. Okay, so let's go into page 110. Of the 110 in on the handout, and that is now dealing with the virtue.
Is any more of this making around? One, two.
It says a life of, now this is in Stolen Lake on page 30. A life of virtue was a condition required by the Egyptian mysteries, as elsewhere, intellectual concept. But it is a positive valor and virility of the soul. So by living a life of virtue, your soul becomes empowered. So then if we look here on the handout, it talks about the initiate. Certain conditions have now to be digestion, right? It's Virgo. When you consume something, your body then takes the essence of it and uses it for the good and eliminates the bad. So as you're making choices, the body is ruled by the laws of nature, so it obeys. Now we disobey because we start putting crap in our body that we don't want or need. But anyway, so the question here is when you're making choices, what is the reference point upon which you base your choice? Is it worldly things? Is it temporary things? Or is it absolute things or universal things? Are you based upon the spiritual or the physical? Do you base your decision upon the higher self or the lower self? The lower self is like the physical body. I'm hungry, I want some food, I want some sex, I want some money, I want some notoriety, or I want some, everybody to just pay attention to me or whatever. Although that's a lower self.
Yeah.
Oh,
So then is that driving you? Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to this.
Discriminate. So do you have allegiance to your higher self? I pledge allegiance. Do you truly pledge allegiance to? Yes, sir.
I think the key part of that is the ability to discriminate. If we just pledge allegiance without the ability to discriminate, we find ourselves pledging allegiance to the 40 ounce, or pledging allegiance to red, white, and blue, pledging allegiance to a preacher who has no allegiance to a higher reasoning or devotion to right, even though I'm skipping ahead to it. So I think the key ability, and maybe this is one of the most frustrating things in dealing with our people in our circumstance, is that the people seem to really lack the ability to distinguish the unreal versus the real.
Because they have not been initiated. Initiation is the capacity to transmit the body of knowledge from one generation to the next. We no longer control the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next. And so thusly those who misinterpret and distort and confuse or are ignorant of the truth now are in control of transmitting the knowledge from one generation to the next. So then the reasonableness, the logic, their logic now is based upon reasons that are perverted and distorted reasons. But relative to those reasons, things become true. But the logic is based upon the temporal as opposed to the absolute. But relative to that reference point, people can justify what they do and feel their truth. They're being true. devotion to right. The aspirant here learns to do what is right because it is right, without regard to your own gain or loss. This is sometimes called indifference to personal reward as the fruit of good actions. So you're not doing something because you're going to get a reward for it. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's only better come to class. After all the class is over, then I should not. It says, this indifference is the natural result of the previous step. Men or people cease to crave for earthly rewards when they realize their impermanent character. Six qualifications. That's 2 plus 6 make 8. It says control of thoughts, purity and calmness, which result from control of the mind. We just talked about the whole thing about meditation and slowing your mind down and becoming calm. Control of actions, mastering of one's actions and words. So your words are things, because word is energy, is vibration. So when you say something, you set up an energy pattern. Whatever you project into the universe feels it. So if you're out there saying, oh, I'm tired, I'm sick to my stomach of this all the time, after a while you're going to have stomach cancer or something's going to happen to you. Because you create that reality. So then you should be very conscious of what you're thinking and what you're saying, because you create your own reality. Tolerance, freedom from bigotry, from an exaggerated attachment to any doctrinal belief, leading to a wide impartiality. So it says an exaggerated attachment to any doctrine or doctrinal belief or belief system. You got some people saying that their way is the right way. Whoever don't believe their way is wrong. I can't deal with them dead Negroes. Or those crazy this or crazy that. If everything comes from the Creator, everything is a part of creation. So everything is playing a role within the greater plan. So then the thing may be you're not understanding what the greater thing is. Or you're so self-righteous that you're trying to prop your own self up and you're trying to put other people down. Forbearance, leading freedom from resentment in respect to real or fancied wrongs. It doesn't say freedom from doing the right thing. It says freedom from resentment in respect to real or fancied wrong. So a lot of times when people got to say, oh, that means when I turn up, if somebody beat me up, I just lay there and, forgive them for beating me up. No. It says that, and I go back to my martial arts training, here's the way interpretation is we believe in self-defense. An example is like you don't let somebody come in and just destroy the space. But the thing is, in keeping them from destroying the space, you're supposed to do it from a position of consciousness. You understand that these people are doing this, why? Because they got to be ignorant in some kind of fashion. They have to be ignorant because if they are spiritual beings, right? Their souls going through bodies, they are. But they have become so lost, so ignorant of who they really are, they're acting against themselves. It's ignorance. Now, if you say you are knowledgeable, you're supposed to understand that, if you really know. Which means then you still don't let them destroy it, but you don't do it out of anger. You do it out of it's the right thing to do. It's like your children. You can discipline your children, but you don't stop to do it out of anger. When you do it out of anger, you're going to hurt them when it comes to the extreme. And so the point is I'm trying to raise some people say, oh, that means like, oh, we just got to submit to injustice and don't fight back, and that's not what it's saying. But see, if you understand the other principles, it says do right for right, say to you do what's right. Right? Somebody's doing wrong, you got to try to correct that. The second piece is that is the freedom from resentment is that, wow, I lost the thought. Question back there.
Dadisi, I was just saying about something Key said, and when you made that last point, when we're talking about resentment, freedom from resentment, it's like how easily our allegiance, sometimes we don't understand how we give our allegiance up so easily. One of the things I remember my grandmother and people in the past have said, forgive them, Lord, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do.
Right.
I mean, it's almost as if, exactly what you're saying, even within the religion of Christianity, it's based upon having your pie in the sky, because all this is going to happen to us here, and we're not going to make any changes in our lives. But it's okay for these things to happen in our lives, because of what we're going to receive later, the allegiance and that faith, that blind faith, like maybe discussed in the great year.
In terms of that expression?
The expression and the whole idea of faith.
The expression, the whole idea of faith is if you really don't have faith in something, if you don't really believe in something, it creates a blockage from allowing it to happen. Things can happen based upon faith even if people are ignorant of the laws that are operating. That's why religion is so powerful, because you say, well, I know some born again folks. And they're talking about the miracles that happen in their life. And it's true, they are happening in their life. They're trying to say because they were born again and accepted Jesus Christ their Savior, but then when you talk, and I say that's true, but then what is Jesus Christ? Jesus Christ is a level of consciousness, which is a level of energy. It's a level of consciousness. And so by them believing on this, they vibrate at that level, and they create things to happen. But then other things put them in check. Say if this is true, then how do you then feed a system that's killing people? Then the Bible comes in and interprets. The Bible comes in and says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to, spirit with spirit, and all this stuff. So that becomes the interpretation that's the control factor. Right. And so but the issue is with faith. If you don't have faith, again, I go to martial arts. We have to train to break boards, go through bricks. Everybody got the capacity to do that. You have to learn the proper technique. And even if you learn the proper technique, the part of the proper technique is you have to be able to give your total commitment to it. If you think there and you put a doubt that you can't do it in your mind, that doubt represents resistance, and you won't do it. That's the same thing I'm talking about. Yes. In terms of a couple of things, one thing is that Anat was very young. And he may have had certain, and he was also a pharaoh, which means he was a young pharaoh who may have had a particular, you have to understand the conditions of his environment, what was going on in his everyday environment. He may have saw that the way that the people were relating to a lot of the religious order was kind of taking them off in a different light. I'm just speculating. To the point, I saw that Akhenaten also brought in, helped to bring in the downfall of the Egyptian empire. because he's not going to give warfare. And so by him not supporting the military and the alliances that create the buffer zone between Persia and Kemet, he set up the eventual downfall of the Persians coming in and conquering Kemet. And so the priesthood also in his taking into effect, you got to make an everyday family image and 1 out of 10. See, there's more to it than that, because again, the symbolism that the initiates interpreted had a totally different meaning than how the masses interpreted it. So I'm saying there's a deeper story here than just the way we did it in history. If you start looking at it from a philosophical and metaphysical perspective. So what you were talking about in terms of the whole concept of Aten and all that, I haven't extensively studied in depth, all the time.
They have a lot of, well, going for what history tells you, they had a lot of God for that.
What's God? What is God?
No, the statue.
No.
The God,
What is God?
saying?
I'm asking you, what is God?
You have to be what is God.
Yes. Example of why we have to get back into principles of philosophy. Understanding the nature of truth, understanding logic, understanding the reason, the basis of your reasoning. What is the foundation where you get these ideas from? Where do ideas come from? You have to go all the way back and look at where these ideas come from. Because then you need to look at and investigate what you be saying. See, we have a tendency to say a lot of things because we pick these things up as we've just lived. It might have been through TV, popular book, whatever it is. And so the critical thing is, you're not your body, you're not your feelings, and you're not your thoughts. So because you think something, don't make it true. Because we think of things, we think it comes from us. Because we don't question and test the foundations or the assumptions. Okay, now, what am I talking about? You said number 3. You start talking about, you start getting confused. When you start mixing stuff together, and you start thinking about what you said, you say, wait a minute, I gotta change that. You said he, person, being was cool. Because being is being, right? That's being. You can be a chair, you can be a star, you can be the universe, you can be God, you can be a leaf. Being. God is the beingness. Right? The one, you say it can't be a one, but you was trying to make one, so you was trying to make one like a number, as opposed to oneness. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right? So anyway,
let me try.
Okay, go ahead.
I may be able to.
The thing that she was saying that she was putting a symbolic sense. There's a hierarchy of forces. The hierarchy of forces are that the universe consists of forces in various levels of operation. You are nothing but various levels of forces in various levels of operation, various relationships. Underneath all of it is energy. Underneath everything is energy. Now, if you want to go in and try to define what that energy is, it gets down into that, but it's energy. So it's a hierarchy of forces. So basically, the different forces have different characteristics. So you talk about water and air and earth and fire and all these are different types of forces. So what we did is we named the characteristics of those forces and we gave it an image that our minds could understand. That's why when she's saying about God, she starts trying to make God, or the concept of God, relate to her experience and her thinking. Because she starts going, is it just sitting up somewhere? See, we're trying to take something that is infinite and limit it to something that is finite.
Yes.
Which means, and see, how are you going to take something that is infinite and limit it? You can't limit the infinite. It's illimitable. So then, see, the thing is, you can't know God by thinking. You can't know God by thinking. You only can truly know God by going into your intuitive mind and sensing it. But see, you only can get that. See, which the battle with all of us is that we've already been conditioned by a certain way of thinking. So now as we try to deal with these ideas, we're trying to deal with these ideas from the way we've been conditioned to think about ideas. That's why you have to go back to the origin of things, which takes a long time. I've been studying since 1971. I am just now getting to a point where I can say, oh, I'm just really getting ready now to learn.
What do you mean? Okay, so what is your
Point?
no? What is your how do you wish? What is your like religion or what is Dr. Ben? What Dr.
I can't say what Dr. Ben
no,
is.
and he knows
So he is.
Huh? No, that's what he is. I'm saying he knows just like you, right? The one of the original Jews, lots of Jews, and he knows that the Egyptians and the Bible was taken from, this and that. He knows all that stuff. So how does he? Do these guys have religions, or do they just look at it as?
You have to ask them that. And I can only speak for myself. I can only speak for myself.
You mean do you let's say, okay, none of these really know, really,
I have a religion. Yes,
okay,
I have a
religion, so
Yeah, I have a religion.
so, okay, how do you,
I'm a universalist.
how do you, pick out what did you mean, how do you pick out religion, what doctrine do you follow?
Interpreting a word based upon a limited definition. Because the true definition for religion is a way of life, and it's binding one back to the beginning. It's religion. So what we end up doing is interpreting words based upon the European experience. What we have to do is go back to the original meaning of a word and operate from that. Because what has happened is the European has interpreted things and made them become negative. So now we approach religion as negative because the way they relate to religion. Religion is a way of life. Your religion is whatever your way of life is. So just because you may say you are a Christian, in words, your way of life defines what your religion is. So then you can say I'm a Christian, but your way of life may be following the way of capitalism. That's your religion. The way of the dollar, the way of violence, the way of drugs, the way of job advancement. You know what I'm saying? The way of life is your religion.
Okay, so I have to use, what would be your,
I said it was universal. I'm a universalist.
Yeah. Did you say something else before? You said you meditation or something?
Yeah, Black Gnostic Studies.
Hey, what is that? What is that?
That's the school I went to.
The school, like that.
That's the school I went to. It's called Black Gnostic Studies. It's a school. It has a course of study.
Oh, okay, I thought you were talking about, I thought it was
And so out of that school, you become trained in the information that I'm sharing with you.
okay.
And out of that school, the religion that we deal with is the universal religion, because behind all your orthodox religions, the bottom or underneath of that is one wisdom teaching. It's one universal doctrine. They said, we just got through reading, that all the initiates and sages of all the religions were initiates of the wisdom teachings. And the question that while I'm raising questions and engaging this dialogue with people is a purpose is behind it. The purpose is trying to show how we're thinking. The whole purpose of all of this is about transforming the way we are thinking. Because the way we are thinking becomes the obstacle for us to know. I tell you things and you go right over it because your mind is full. See, you're not receptive. You're like, you're you're going out.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah, you're out. And I'm not putting no moral judgment on it. I'm just saying an act, your actions. It's like you're already getting ready to ask me another question before, and you're not listening to the answer I gave you. That means that you're full. And I can say you're full of yourself, but it's not a negative statement. I'm not like other people saying. You have to become receptive.
Like a child.
Right, you have to become receptive. And the reason why I said that is you asked me a question. I answered your question. You didn't listen to my answer.
No,
You went on to some other stuff.
No, I thought when you said that school you went to, I thought that was religion also. That's what
But again, listen to what I'm saying. See, again, you're trying to, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Everything I say, you're doing this. You're not calming yourself and listening. That's what I'm saying. You're not being receptive. You see, again, the question is, this is important because this is the point. We're our thinking, we're so defensive. You say you want to know, but you think you already know. And I'm not putting I'm not putting a personal judgment. I'm really, as a teacher, saying to a student, and whenever you walk in the classroom here, it's that relationship, when you leave it's whatever, but in terms of how your mind, I'm trying to reflect you back to yourself so you can see yourself better. See, sometimes, even now, your mind is so busy countering or coming to the next thing, you can't absorb. And the critical thing we start off with was meditation. You said you have to savor. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
Do anybody have a blue Nissan parked on the left-hand side of it? Right in front of the house, is blocking the driveway. Can you move the blue Nissan?
Yeah.
In front of the driveway, anybody got
Yes, the blue Nissan.
On the side here?
Yes.
Thank you.
First started said maybe I've gone through the same stage, initiation as the brothers know, we all gone through, or maybe we're coming to it, or at one time or another we passed through it. But one thing I gathered when I was listening was that it was like he was trying to peg it, like trying to fit this peg into this hole. Did it fit? And I was thinking that when I was listening, I was thinking that we all go through that. We have to hear something that we can identify with. And not identifying with it in a way we didn't understand it, or I didn't understand it at the time. So I was always trying to peg something, trying to make it fit into what I already understood. And if I didn't understand it, it just sometimes, it was difficult for me to really absorb it. So again, with being patient, a lot of times I was able just to get through that. But I didn't know it in the beginning. I didn't know it was an initiation stage. I didn't know it was something that we all go through. First become enlightened.
And the thing, I appreciate your presence, really, because this energy, these questions, it brings that, everybody learns from that. So it's not a person, it's not, it's good. It's good. Okay, so then, and the other thing I want to say, that piggyback on what I'm saying, the process of gaining understanding is a protracted struggle. Okay, so you got to think in terms of years.
Right there, what I'm saying. Now, I don't really, okay, now, is there like a Bible to this, or, I'm trying to ask you.
No, okay.
I'm trying to understand.
I understand. Now, you need to listen to what I have said.
Yeah.
I've given you.
Yeah, I know you told me, but now.
So what did I say? Is that universalism was. What did I say? How did I define what it was?
Where you live and.
I said that's religion. Right? I said religion is your way of life, and also talking about binding one back to the origins or beginnings. True definition for religion. Okay, right? I said universalism, I was a universalist, and I made some gestures. I said universalism talks about underneath all the major religions, look at underneath all the major religions is one universal doctrine, a body of knowledge, okay? And then I gave a reference we just read in the lesson material that all the great teachers and Buddhas to Moses to Christ were initiates of the mystery system. Okay? Now, the universal knowledge of the curriculum of the mystery system is the foundation of all religions. So the universal language is the universal truths of the mystery system. And if you learn that information, whatever religion you deal with, the truth, the same knowledge is going to be in there. Well, different people who are teaching aspects of their interpretation or the knowledge. My particular school says you have to do a comparative study to get the truth. There's no one book or one school has the whole truth. It's by you understanding the majority of the people, understand them all. Comparative analysis of all the major schools is when you really come to the essence of the truth. Okay, although a person can, through their own self, be attracted to a particular way, and through getting into that, they can come to the same truth too. So that's a personal, that depends upon your nature reality. Right. And that is a minimum of 20 years. If you're going to talk about being into the truly deeper aspect of the knowledge, and it's really traditionally it was 40 years to become the high level initiate. Majority of most people have to be 95. Don't, but the time is illusion. So, and then what you do, I guess the final piece is when you go to the books have references. So you follow the references. Those books will have references. You follow those references. And they will take you on the trail back.
I stumbled on something
You're talking about. But in that book, in the introduction of that book, it talks about the Piscean age and the Aquarian age. It explains them in that book. It explains what they are in that book. So you can't steal, that book is available in the bookstores. You can't pick it up.
What book?
So SO1 has it. SO1 books.
Okay.
Okay. And in the Bodhi tree, anything on metaphysics you can get at the Bodhi tree. And right.
Okay, world beginning at a certain time. You see, if you look at the world like that, you'll be limited. You look at the universe, you think about the universe, because if you're thinking about the God concept, take for instance, this room is the universe. The world we live in is just like a speck. See the speck, you can't even see it. That's the world we live in. So if you are limiting God to this, our world, then it's a big mistake in conception. So you look at it as the world, there has been worlds, universe, solar systems, even before our world was begun. So when you start thinking in those terms, then you have a wider perspective. That's why today they say the Europeans, the whites are saying that the aliens built the pyramids. But the Africans had known the concept of other worlds before the pyramids were ever built. And that's before that church. So let's think the bigger aspect about
That's all we're doing.
Yes. Say again? Okay. Next year, then I want to get a couple of questions to finish up this. The time that a lot of these events was happening, you had Egypt was in decline. You had a lot of intermarriages and stuff that went on. You start having mixture of the races that started to go on. And also created confusion in allegiances, because now some of the relatives was from the north and this type of thing. There were all kinds of political intrigues and schemes that people were trying to work to get power. You had some of the priestcraft that started becoming corrupted in terms of becoming more power hungry as opposed to the purity of the doctrine. And so you mix all these things together, you had different personalities that started coming to the throne who may not have been of the highest character, but maybe because of family line they got in the position as opposed to that they were the strongest character. And so if you put a lot of stuff together, you had a lot of things that went on like that. And so I would have to go to, I can research on it. Probably when you talk to, it's like Shiva Noko, who will be speaking Saturday over in 5:30. We'll be talking on committed civilization. He would be the expert in the field that probably gives very detailed information on why those things happen, especially as Asiatic, African-present Asian. So I would refer you to the experts on that. But again, what we have to look at again, as we're saying, is this period of time was a decline. And everything operates in cycles. So everything has a birth, it has a growth, and then it has a decline. And it transforms when you have that same cycle again. And then the other period is we have to look at everything that happens on a grander scale. Because we talk about Kemet, like we talk about Kemet, and before Kemet there was Nubia. Before that, all the way back to the beginning of human beings, we've always had a God concept from the beginning. And so we've always understood, even though we may not have articulated it, that there was one great being that governed all life, all forms. And we always paid respect to that. And as human beings evolved, they started to articulate different types of ideas in different times and these types of things, different situations. So basically, to understand what happens, you have to understand the time and the space that it happens, and there'll be a certain pattern in that time and space. If you go to a different time and space, you get a different pattern. And so if you really want to understand what's happening at a particular time, you have to understand the time and space pattern. And so every religion came out of a particular time, space pattern. And so, again, it's looking at it from a bigger perspective, you see the human family is on a journey. And so each of these little experiences are exactly that, an experience to provide us with more information toward our ultimate destination. And so the point is to learn from the experience, but don't get stuck in the experience, and keep the goal, the ultimate goal, in mind. And the ultimate goal is the spiritualization of matter. It's for us to rise ourselves back up to spiritual consciousness. For the whole human family to eventually arrive at that destination. And see, all these things we're going through is just lessons to help us remember, hopefully, be wise to move there. So, specifically, I would definitely say, talk to I want to finish these pieces, so we got this from Lacey. So we were dealing with forbearance, which we got from that. So steadfastness, incapability of being turned aside from one's purpose.
I say.
So key thing here is what's your purpose. Now, if you understand what your spiritual purpose is, your spiritual purpose is to unite, right? The highest level of initiation is to unite with spiritual consciousness, with spiritual truth. So that is the ultimate purpose of every human being. So then that goes back to discrimination in terms of the choices you make. Is your alliance with the higher self or with the lower self? So then are you steadfast in your commitment to your spiritual self? Or can somebody come in and bribe you or tempt you or take you off the path?
Well, if you're not careful enough, you don't know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
You don't really know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Not,
Absolutely.
So it's like beware.
Absolutely. And the taking off of the path becomes a part of the lesson to help get you back on the path.
So everyone is in control of their own spirit. It's your own responsibility.
Right. Second, faith. Confidence in the power of the master to teach the truth and of oneself to grasp and wield the truth. Part of that is when you come into a class, again, don't accept anything I say. My thing is I want to turn you on to the knowledge, and you're supposed to go out and validate the knowledge for yourself. Until you validate the knowledge for yourself, you really don't know. It becomes blind faith. What we're saying is now you must know for yourself. I mean, you must challenge the ideas and go to the documentation yourself, and then if you can't apply it in your life, you don't know it. And so, but then you have to have confidence in those that you're going to for the knowledge to be able to give it to you, but you also have to have the confidence in your ability to deal with the truth yourself. But you have the capacity. You have unlimited capacity. A lot of times we become frustrated because we've been conditioned thinking in a limited and inferior way. You can be a multiple genius. Every one of us has the capacity to be a multiple genius. When you move to follow the disciplines, you unlock the potentiality of your spiritual self, and you become multiple in your capacity. If you look at the history, those who were in the higher knowledge were always multiple. They used to do one thing. They could write, they could dance, they could do self-defense, they could do architecture, medicine, poetry, all those things. Because they're really all reflections of the same laws. They're all governed by the same laws once you get into those laws. So then having faith. The other piece here is direct order or succession. A clearly defined desire for spiritual existence and union with the higher ideas. So it says clearly defined desire for spiritual existence. Most people don't even have a desire for spiritual existence, let alone a clearly defined desire. This is one of the, now these are the characteristics on the probationary path. First level. First level. And so we're not even, civilization, society is not even being governed by the fundamental principles for spiritual consciousness. If you look at our society, it's really governed on the opposite values, really the vices. So the vices, what are the seven deadly sins? Gluttony, pigging out on whatever it be, food, cars, money, power, prestige, anger,
Pride,
slothfulness, being lazy. You know, you want to sit to a class and have somebody spoon feed you as opposed to you go and get them big books and struggle with them yourself.
I know that feeling.
Covetousness on other people's things as opposed to you knowing that you can get whatever you will get whatever you're supposed to have based upon you doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Once you lock into your purpose in life, whatever you're supposed to have, you will have. That's relationships and the whole nine. Everything. See, sometimes we want things when we want it, as opposed to when we're supposed to have it.
Go down. Go ahead. That's right.
It says here, readiness for initiation. This is the seventh principle. Readiness for initiation, results of the previous acquirements. That means the other six, by practicing the other six virtues, you then become ready for initiation. That means being ready for it. That means that by practicing the virtue, they say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So by you operating and preparing yourself, then the next step will always be there for you. And that's a law. That's a law. That's why you don't really worry about the next step. What you do is you fulfill the now to the best of your ability, and the next step will take care of itself. A lot of times people are so busy looking, it's like a football game, can't be throwing that pass, and the guy is worried about getting and running with it before he get it, drop the ball. Same thing in your life. You can't be worried about the next step and stumble on the step that you're on. If you are strong at the step you at, it's going to be a strong foundation for the next step, and for the next step, and make your whole thing be strong. On that note, it said the candidate is not expected to fully develop these attributes. He must or she must have made progress on them before they are ready for the first steps on the path proper. So these are just preparatory before you can go to the path proper.
That means you gotta come correct.
That's right.
What is good? Julius, well, Julius.
It says when the time has come, the person is regarded fit for initiation. They are conducted by the master who has been watching over their earlier progress to the threshold where the guardians of the mystery open to him the straight gate. See, it doesn't have to be a physical person as your master, because your ultimate master is the soul that knows. By you practicing the virtues and engaging in developing the higher arts and sciences, it will then prepare you to be able to follow the wisdom of your own soul, and it will lead you where you need to go. Now that will probably in life reflect itself in you finding some other teachers or schools or disciplines or whatever that may be. But again, it is not the seen, but the unseen that is the real.
All right.
Can then that master be a disembodied spirit?
How will that disembodied spirit communicate to you?
From your internal.
So relative to your contact
Or to dreams?
is through the intuitive mind, intuitive wisdom that you're able, that is the medium. Now, if you find it as a disincarnated entity, it's still even, well, I don't want to disregard that because there are schools and there are realities there. But the ultimate reality is the divine mind within your own self. And so, again, on spiritual level, like attracts like. You see, if you want to get into that element, there are also negative energies that a person can open themselves up to and then get off on a trip. That's why it's really by focusing in on the principles that develop the ability for discrimination, and so people can't bring nothing to you wrong that you go for. And whatever level of energy it comes to you at.
Well, in that one of the basic laws, principles of physics is that matter can be neither created nor destroyed, but merely transformed from one form to another.
Right.
Any entity who would have been embodied in any previous time would create waves emanating from their actions, their thoughts, their behaviors, their writings, their teachings perhaps. And then these waves do exist beyond the death of the flesh. So then a disembodied spirit, in effect, could emanate from a book.
See, the other thing you have to get into is understanding that when we talk about God is the all, right? And see, was next week we'll talk about that? Well, that's Tuesday class, we'll talk about magic as defined. The whole human family, see, every experience we as individuals gain becomes a part of the collective memory of the whole human race. And that aspect of that collective memory resides within your own consciousness. You can access that universal memory.
It's called the collective unconsciousness or pre-consciousness.
Right. And so then, with sometimes what people think are, well, see, I don't want to get into that because there's different schools and that's not my particular expertise. My particular school is Raja Yoga, yoga of the mind. Not the intellect, the mind. And so then, through your knowledge and knowing, you then can deal with all the things that you know. And so what I'm saying is, I'm not discrediting you. First of all, this Arcane India is not going to come out in the book.
And I'm not saying this as an absolute, I'm just saying this as, again, an idea.
The experience of the living energy that created that book then now resides in the collective memory of the human race. Based upon your particular energy, you can set up a resonance that is similar to that particular type of energy and then pull that information through you to consciousness. Check.
I got one question I like to leave.
Another part of you is aware of the other side.
Yeah, I know the consequences, but I know, I understand them.
You don't understand why you did it?
It's so easy
To do it?
Yeah, why we did it that time.
Well, see, I'd have to get into a more, specific situation.
Okay.
What is your conditions? What's your situation?
Okay.
What did you do?
Now-
All that kind of stuff. I'm saying it becomes a specific situation, and if you look at all the details, it'll tell you why whatever particular thing you need to do. Then your position in life, and you're probably trying to get you got some kind of benefit. What was the benefit that you got from doing it?
I'm just being open, don't judge me.
Because I've been in situations where I lived on, in that life, and I still go to do, the whole thing. Sometimes it can be the phase of your life, and a lot of it is economics. Because a lot of us are not prepared because of being black people and coming from families that are not in the business and other things like that. And then the way the economy is, it's not that easy for us to have be economically viable. First. But if you don't understand that because you've been conditioned by this European to think, I'm just here now, and if I get away with it, I got away with it, then that's your reference point, your logic, right? It's based upon that. So, you're the creator of your own destiny.
And in charge of your spirit.
Session with the next chapter of chapter 4.